بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين مع بعد. So last week we went through the elephant incident and also the miracles of the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. So when the Prophet ﷺ was born, the various miracles which took place at that time, and how the Prophet ﷺ, one of the main things was how he affected the Emperor of Persia at that time. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he was born, the Emperor of Persia, there were many things that happened in Persia which caused a lot of grief to the Emperor of Persia, and this is something we covered last week in a lot of detail. So when he was born, there was many signs, especially at the place he was born, there was light emanating, and all of these things indicated that the being that's coming is not a normal being, it's someone very, very special. So this is just to follow on. So we got up to the birth. So now when the Prophet ﷺ is born and then comes into the world, what happens from here? This is the next thing which we'll look at, inshallah. So the first thing which of note which happens is that the Prophet ﷺ, when he was born, his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, as we know, his dad was Hashim, he was a very, very respected. Abdul Muttalib was also very, very respected. So Abdul Muttalib, he took him to the Kaaba. He was the leader of the Quraysh. So he was very well known. So it's like, the highest person in society. So that's why he had the honor of taking him. Also remember, his father had already passed away. So Abdul Muttalib took him. And the one thing which he did first was the Aqiqah. Now, when a baby is born, generally we have many things which we have to take care of. It's not something we can just, pass off as nothing to do with Islam. There's many things we should do. So, for example, when the baby is born, we should do the adhan. We should, in the ear, and the iqam in another ear. This is one thing. Another thing is tahniq. We should try and get somebody of a high status, or even a normal person, just to do tahniq, which is to choose something and then feed it to the baby. And this is again something which is from the sunnah. The baby's head should be shaved, and then the hair which comes off should be weighed, and that much sadaqah should be given in silver. So the weight of silver should be given. So these are just a few things. So there's many things surrounding the birth of a baby. Also,
it's included that girls' hair should be shaved.
Yeah.
It says not should be. Girls not.
He's talking about girls.
Girls.
Is it the same routine for them?
it depends. Generally, yeah, he'd shave the baby. I have to see about that, but generally he would shave. Then circumcision, obviously, again the Prophet ﷺ, a lot of these things will happen on the 7th day, within the baby being born. The azan happens immediately. The rest of these things happen on the 7th day. For example, the circumcision and all of these things, the Prophet ﷺ, he got the circumcision done in the 7th day, not in the 7th year. So it's very important to try. Some of us, in some cultures, we delay it a lot, way too much. So you keep it within the immaturity, and then while the child is still very, very immature, it's best to do it while he's still a baby. So these are a few things. The point here is that the Prophet ﷺ, his grandfather done Aqiqah. Aqiqah is wajib on all children. Some say sunnah, but generally in our madhab, if it's a boy, we should do 2 sheep or goat, and if it's a girl, it should be 1. And also in our madhab, even if it's a boy, you can do 1 and it's okay. But generally this is very, very important that we sacrifice an animal whenever a baby is born. And obviously if we do it back home, if we do it in our country, it's very cheap as well. If we do it in this country, again, maximum £200-300 for even if it's a boy. So it's something which we should keep in mind as well for when a baby is born. This is the first thing. Prophet ﷺ, he had his Aqiqah done. His uncle done Aqiqah, and then he invited all the leaders of the Quraysh to eat the meat of the Aqiqah. So they all came. Then the next thing the Prophet ﷺ done is he named the baby. So the name he gave was Muhammad. Now this is a name which the people at that time had never heard of before. They were very, very surprised. Why are you giving him such a strange name? So they all said, you shouldn't give this kind of name. This is a new name. It's a very innovative name. So then the reason behind this is Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ, he actually had a dream. And in that dream, there was a chain which was attached to Abdul Muttalib. And then this chain transformed into a tree. And then all the leaves of the tree were glittering. And then this tree, which was glittering, which was attached to Abdul Muttalib originally, this tree, some members of the Quraysh attached themselves to the tree. All the leaves of the tree are glittering. Some members of the Quraysh became close to the tree. They attached themselves. Some other members tried to chop down the tree. So whenever somebody would come to chop down the tree, then somebody would come and stop. A young man would come and stop this person. So this was the dream of Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib got the dream interpreted, and then somebody told him that there's going to be the boy which is born, he's going to be very, very highly praised, and people will sing his praises. This was the thing. So now obviously Muhammad, literally it comes from hamd, to be praised. So Muhammad generally means to be praised. So they said that because people are going to sing his praises, that based on this dream, Abdul Muttalib gave him this name. Abdul Muttalib was obviously still thinking about this, but then even the mother of the Prophet ﷺ, Amina, she also had a dream in which she was told to keep the name Muhammad. She was also told to keep the name Ahmad as well. So these were the two names which were given to the Prophet ﷺ, but these were the dreams which they had. Muhammad generally has two meanings. One is to be praised, and one is, which some people give, is to be beyond any kind of flaw. So to be so perfect. So there's two meanings. One is to be praised. One is that people always are praising this person, repeatedly praised. And the other meaning is that the person whose name is Muhammad, he is flawless. His character and attributes are completely flawless. So these are the two attributes of the Prophet ﷺ, and Muhammad is the name which was given. And this is the first thing that we see from the two things which happen, Aqiqah and then the naming. So again, giving the name, this is another thing which when a baby is born we have to give. So it's important that again we try and be careful when we're naming our children. We try and give sensible names, and ideally, alhamdulillah, nowadays living in this culture, we can give names which are reflective of Islam. So names we find in the Quran, names we find in Hadith, names of Sahaba, names which make sense, names which the Prophet ﷺ gave, he praised. You know, the Prophet ﷺ, for example, in Hadith, he says that the best name you can keep is Abdullah, Abdul Rahman, and then there's some names which he praises and says these are good names. If anybody came to him with a bad name or a name which was affiliated to a bad group of people, the Prophet ﷺ would change the name. So even as adults, if we have names which don't really make any sense, then we should try and make sure we change our names. And when we call other people and they have nice names, we should keep that name nice. We shouldn't add our own slur into it and change it into a name which doesn't make any sense anymore. Somebody's name is somebody, like, for example, also we should find out people's names as well. For example, how many of you actually know what my name is? It's something we should think about, and try and address people with their names. Even, for example, you might think, oh, I'm not going to call Imam with his name. But you can add Imam and name as well, it's not a problem. When you call somebody with their name, psychologically, they always love this. It's important to give this. And firstly, it's important to have a good name. So if you have a name which is a bit ridiculous, we try and change it to something sensible. And some other people who have nice names, we try and call them with that name. We don't change it with slurs. For example, one famous name we have a name Bashir. So we keep it as Bashir, we don't change it to Basir. I mean, so often we hear people just saying, oh, this is Basir. It's such a horrible slur which people give. When somebody has such a beautiful name, you try and keep it. Allah mentions it in the Quran as a sifa of the Prophet ﷺ, that he is Bashir. So now we try and keep it the same way. Many names we have, so when we're naming our children, we try and keep them nice names, which they will be looked up to because of these names. And if we ourselves have names which sometimes need to be changed, then we can change this as well. So this is something we should keep in mind as well, that naming in our culture should become something which is, a Muslim name. So then also it's easy to remember as well. We'll notice this, the people who have sensible names, for example, we have brother Muhammad. Some of us, we think that we can't call everybody Muhammad because, it's too many people who will be called Muhammad then. But for example, if you think in Colchester Masjid, there's one person called Muhammad, we all know him as Muhammad because it's his name and he calls himself Muhammad. So despite having a very common name, he can still have so much beauty in the name, and it's one of the best names we can have. So just, a lot of the times when we're studying hadith, you have a chain. So for example, from Imam Bukhari to the Prophet ﷺ, you have many, many people going. So we'd study, Imam Bukhari says, I heard from my teacher Yahya, I heard from my teacher Sa'id, I heard from my teacher Abu Musa, and then from the Sahaba, and then the Prophet. So all these names come. Sometimes people, they ask you for names, so then you think of names from here. We should always try and keep our names simple, so people can recognize us and we have nice names, and people can then associate us with Islam as well. This is, a name is an identity. So that took a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. But a name is very, very important. So this is the first thing of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ, Ahmad, The other name which his mother gave him, he had two names, and mother had two names, Muhammad and Ahmad. Ahmad means the most praised. So these are the two meanings of Muhammad. So it's a very, very beautiful name. So now, right from his start, if he's going to be the best being to ever walk on the face of the earth, he starts off with a name which gives him that authority. So it's the same, the name has an effect on the person as well. And also we should look into the meaning as well, but I'm not going to mention those examples either. Then the next chapter which comes is suckling, where the Prophet ﷺ, where did he have the milk from? So the first few days from his mother, Amina, she fed the Prophet ﷺ, and after this, which was for a short period of time, was Abu Lahab had a slave girl called Suwayba, and she breastfed the Prophet ﷺ. So Abu Lahab, the Suwayba, she was the first person, because she was a slave girl of Abu Lahab, she found out about the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. So she ran to Abu Lahab, this is very big news, and gave him the good news. He was so happy that he freed Suwayba as a result of this good news. That's how happy he was. So he actually freed her. That's how happy he was on the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. Remember, Abu Lahab was the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. There's a few uncles we should keep in mind. Obviously we know Abdullah and Abdul Muttalib, he had 10 sons, but all of them are not that relevant. The relevant ones, Abdullah himself, the father of the Prophet ﷺ, Abbas, then we have Hamza radiyallahu anhuma, these two, and then Abu Lahab, this is a very famous one as well. So these are the four main uncles, and then the one that looked after him we're going to come to, Abu Talib. So Abu Talib is very famous, Abu Lahab for the wrong reasons is famous, and then Hamza and Abbas. These are the two very, very famous ones. Hamza and Abbas, we know they fought in many battles. Hamza was martyred in Uhud, and Abbas fighting in Hunayn with the Prophet ﷺ. In the Quran the mention comes, there's just two of them fighting against everyone. So these are the uncles. We try and keep this family in mind. So his uncles, because even when he's born, the uncles were already there. So these uncles were there. His father had passed away. His four brothers were still there, and they're all going to play big parts in his life. Abu Lahab and Abu Talib as well. You try and keep this in mind. So now Hamza, who was one uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, he drank milk from Thuwayba as well. So he was a bit younger than Abu Lahab. So Abu Lahab's slave girl also, she fed Hamza as well. So this made the Prophet ﷺ and Hamza, despite being uncles, he made them blood brothers. To the extent that the Prophet ﷺ later on in his life, he mentions that Ibn Abbas, he mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, he was offered the daughter of Hamza radiallahu anh in marriage, but he couldn't accept because they had drunk milk from the same person. So also nowadays this doesn't happen. So the rulings aren't that relevant. But Islamically, if you drink milk from the same person, you become haram on each other, and the whole progeny becomes haram. You can't drink that. So the breast milk, if it's drunk, then it's something which has to be taken quite seriously. Even nowadays, if any of us didn't know that, it's something to keep in mind, because nowadays we have this new technology. So very often women take it out and leave it on the side somewhere. So if somebody accidentally drinks that, that's a bit of a problem. So it's important to keep that in mind, inshallah. That, there's a lot of rulings with breast milk, so we have to keep that in mind, inshallah. So this was the original, the mother first, for the first few days, then Thuwayba, who was the slave girl of Abu Lahab, and then after this, the Prophet ﷺ, he went to the village, and Halima, she was breastfeeding the Prophet ﷺ. So the main story which happens, the main story of today, is the story of Halima. So the custom of the Arabs was living in the city. It's a bit like living in London. It's not very nice. So they'd send them to places like Colchester and Chelmsford to speak proper English and to have proper air. So these kind of areas they'd come out to. So people in Makkah would send their people out of Makkah, out into the villages. They can speak better Arabic. The air is cleaner. And also they become stronger and healthier. These are a few of the reasons. The food's more organic. So things like this. So the Prophet ﷺ was going to be sent out. Annually, the females would come. The woman would come from the village. We're going to come and take a baby, and we'll look after the baby, feed the baby for all of these days. This is called a wet nurse. In proper English, it's called a wet nurse, and her job is mainly to feed the baby. So now, many women came. The Prophet ﷺ, remember, was an orphan. So all the women came to Makkah. Their main aim was to find somebody to take back with them. So now the Prophet ﷺ wasn't known to be wealthy because of being an orphan. So they couldn't expect remuneration. We're not going to get any money from this. So all the women would come look at him and say, no money, so they'd go away. Halima, now some of them were well off, some of them were rich, some were poor. But Halima the problem she had is that she was also very poor. So there's a table here which just mentions very briefly the 4 things and 4 changes that happen. But her animal was very, very weak. So the camel and the donkey she came, they was weak and slow. So she was behind everyone, and she got to Makkah after all the other women because her animal was slow. Her animals wouldn't give any milk. She herself wouldn't give any milk, even though she had a baby. This is another problem. And also there was extreme hunger, because for the baby there was extreme hunger, she had hunger. And she actually came with her husband. So she came, her husband came, and baby came. Baby was hungry and very, very crying, always crying because he didn't have any milk. So this is the problem Halima had. So then she came to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, one of the main things, the main reason this story is given as a lot of given a lot of importance is because of the lessons that we take from this story. So when the Prophet ﷺ was there and nobody was taking him. Now Halima, nobody had taken. So now she wanted to leave without, she was originally thinking to leave without anybody, but then she had a conversation with her husband. So then this conversation recorded, وَاللَّهِ لَأَذْهَبَنَّ إِلَى ذَلِكَ الْيَتِيمِ فَلَا أَخُذَنَّهُ. I'm going to go to that yatim, to that orphan, and أَخُذَنَّ, I'm going to take him. The husband said, قَالَ لَا عَلَيْكَ, make sure you do that, no problem. عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَجْعَلَ لَنَا فِيهِ بَرَكَةً. They put trust in Allah. This is the fundamental thing, that which a lot of times is missed. Most of us don't know her husband even went. We think she went with the baby, the husband didn't go. So the husband was on one of the animals, she was on an animal, they both went, and they had this mashwara there as well. What shall we do? Shall we take the orphan or not? She said they put their trust in Allah. As you can see from the text, that Asallah will put trust in Allah, and yaj'alahu, that He will put barakah inside this woman, inside this baby. So this is the one difference that we find. All of these other women, they put trust in the creation. They put trust in money. They put trust in taking something away. But the one woman who didn't do that, eventually she couldn't do that. She had to put her trust in Allah. She desired barakah from Allah, and she put her trust just in Allah. This is the one difference between Halima and all of the other women. So putting trust in Allah and putting trust in the creation. This is one thing that we learn from this. And this is the underlying thing that we learn from this story, that when she put her trust in Allah, we see the differences Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes. Then she narrates the story herself. We find her own narration, that suddenly as soon as she took the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, her breast filled up with milk. This is the first thing. And then she carried on that just on the way there she was the slowest. All of her animals were weak, they couldn't catch up. On the way back her animals overtook everyone. The females with her, they said, how is this the same animal that you came on, that is so fast it overtook everyone else? This is the one thing. The animals now were having milk as well. This is one thing. Now Halima realized this very, very blessed child that she's got. She's got a very, very blessed child. So now another thing is that when they got back, this area of woman was called Banu Sa'ad. This was their clan. They were afflicted with a very, very severe drought at that time, to the extent that the average person didn't have milk. The average camel would go out, come back with no milk. As in, what I mean is, you go in the morning and you come back at night and the farmer will milk you. So that's the benefit of having an animal. However, this wouldn't happen because the grass was, there was drought completely. This applied to everyone except Halima, to the extent that the narration mentions that the people, these other people in that clan, they would now send their animals to eat the same grass as the Halima's animals were eating. They would literally send their animals, go and eat from that place, because their animals always have milk. But this made no difference to anyone. It was still, they had problems, and Halima's would always come back with milk. So this is the blessing which she saw. Also within herself, remember, she had this one child she couldn't feed. Now from herself, from her own body, she could feed her own child and the Prophet ﷺ as well. She could feed. So this is the general gist of the story. It's a very basic story, very simple. So today we had the birth of the Prophet, the Aqiqah, the upbringing, the Aqiqah, and then we had the suckling, and now we've got this story of Halima. So this is one of the stories. So she comes to Makkah, she takes him away, lots of blessings come. Now after this 2-year period, and she weans him, which we all know what that means, isn't it? She weans the Prophet ﷺ. She takes him off breast milk and he starts eating proper food. It's not like nowadays where we all, within about 2 months they've all started drinking powder milk. They actually properly would drink breast milk for 2 years, and then they would wean him off. And this is very, very difficult. We probably don't know about these difficulties, but this is how the Prophet ﷺ was weaned off breast milk. After 2 years the job's done. So you bring the baby back to Makkah, you leave him in Makkah. This is the general trend. So Halima, true to her word, she went back to Makkah. She took the Prophet ﷺ back to Makkah, to her mother. But she had seen so many blessings that she obviously did not want to let him go. And as well as this, at that time in Makkah there was a plague which had broken out. So Amina also was a bit reserved about having a baby in that climate of so many illness. So she agreed to let Halima take the baby for a few more years. It ended up being 2 years. It was originally a few months. So now Halima took her again, and now he's a bit bigger. Now 2 years old, he can walk, he can run around a little bit. She'd go with the milk brothers and go and graze the animals and play around in the field, where the animals are and all these kind of things. So he would do for those of us that find that strange, if you go to Pakistan and Bangladesh, it's the same thing. 2-year-olds run around in the farm. A 7 or 8-year-old will ride a motorbike in our countries. So again, they mature a little bit quicker in those climates. So now the Prophet ﷺ would go out, and this is where the incident happens where his heart is cleaned. And this is again an incident which is mentioned in all the Seerah books, where the Prophet ﷺ, he is out playing with the brothers, with the milk brothers. And then he's playing, and then suddenly the brothers come running. So the narration will have that the brothers come running to the Halima, and they say, very worried, that somebody's come and split the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. So then obviously the mother is very worried. She comes rushing out to the field as well. She comes to see what's happened. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he records the incident as well. Halima mentions that 2 angels came, Mikael and Jibreel alayhi salam. They came and they split the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. They removed some of the congealed blood. They also had a tray of water. This is all written down anyway. So they all had a tray of water, a tray of ice, and they cleaned the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. They placed it back inside, and they closed the heart up again. So this is the incident which happened, and obviously this caused a lot of concern. It was at this point where Halima eventually, straight after this, took him straight back to Makkah, because she was very concerned for his well-being, and she told Amina about this story. So the mother of the Prophet ﷺ now finds out about this story, and this is a very, very big thing. Imagine, we found out that happened to one of our kids. It's a very scary thing. But she was very, very calm. In fact, she told Halima to calm down as well. She expected this kind of thing. She said, from birth, I have seen miracles in this baby. This baby is miraculous. So obviously miracles like this will happen. She said, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to be worried about. So just be calm and carry on with it. And then she took the baby back, and Halima went back to where she was. So now the Prophet ﷺ is now living with his mother back in Makkah, and this is where the Prophet ﷺ is until this age. And then once at the age of 6, the Prophet ﷺ, he goes with his mother and Ayman. Ayman is a very important character who will play. She comes up, she keeps coming up. Ayman is basically the slave girl of Amina. So the mother of the Prophet ﷺ, Ayman is her slave. So she was very, very close to the Prophet. So people would describe her as the second mother of the Prophet _. So Ayman went, Amina went, and the Prophet _. 3 people went on this journey. They went to Medina to visit some relatives of Amina. And when on the way back, they got there, they stayed there for a month. They came back. On the way back, en route, Amina, she passed away on the way in a place called Abwa. So this is when she passed away, which is very sad for the Prophet ﷺ, that he's still young, he never saw his father, and his mother had just passed away. So then Ayman was still with him, so she brought him back to Makkah. So it's a very close bond between the Prophet ﷺ and Ayman as well. And there's a lot of relationships there as well, which we'll look at later as well. So then now the Prophet ﷺ comes back to Makkah, and now his grandfather, who done his Aqiqah, his grandfather, he gave him the name, looked after him as a baby even. Now his grandfather takes full care of the baby, and he looks after him very well, he loves him a lot. Remember, he's the leader of Makkah, so whenever he would come into the Kaaba, into the vicinity, somebody would put a very special mat out for Abdul Muttalib. Nobody else could sit on this mat. So now even if kids would go to the mat, they would push them away, that this is a special mat for Abdul Muttalib. However, the Prophet ﷺ, now he's 6'7", so he can walk even more. So he would go and sit on this mat, and he was the only person apart from Abdul Muttalib. This is just to show the love Abdul Muttalib would have for him. Abdul Muttalib would encourage him to sit on the mat. He would get him forward. He would take him to the Kaaba. He would, invite him all these important places. He would be with the Prophet ﷺ. So we see the company the Prophet ﷺ had was very, very pious company. So he stayed with him for 2 years with a lot of love, and then when he was about to pass away, he passed away basically, but while he was passing away, he passed on the responsibility. He asked Abu Talib who was his son, to look after the Prophet ﷺ. He told him to give him lots of love and to be very, very careful with him. And he said this is a very, very special son. So he gave this responsibility and passed it on to Abu Talib. And this was the death of Abdul Muttalib. And now we find that he's now moves into the guardianship of Abu Talib, his uncle. And this guardianship, it stays all the way until the Prophet ﷺ, even, he becomes a prophet, and then he stays in Mecca all the way till he becomes nearly 50 years old. Abu Talib stays alive. So this is obviously his uncle, and he stays alive, supports the Prophet very much. And even in this age, now, obviously that's the end of today's kind of the things we've done. But when Abdul Muttalib, he passed away, then now he comes into the care of Abu Talib. So now all the way from here until 40, there's still a few incidents which happen in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And next week we'll try and cover them. Obviously, these are things which, there's very, very subtle lessons we learn from all of these. We take different things from all of these things. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses the best person to come. What kind of lineage he has. How he's kept away from any kind of evil. Even while he's growing up, incidents come that the Prophet ﷺ, he would avoid shameful acts. And this even in childhood age, he wouldn't go and just waste his time and listen to the gossip, or there's certain actions which they do, certain things which were in their culture. Sometimes they would walk around naked, which was the nature of a lot of them there. The Prophet ﷺ, he couldn't do that. He fell unconscious while he was doing this. Different incidents we find about the childhood of the Prophet ﷺ. And what we learn from this is what we call fitrah. Like nature, how our nature should be, which has to sometimes be adapted. Sometimes we like certain things which we're not meant to like. So trying to get that out of us, we see from even the childhood of the Prophet ﷺ, how pure we try and be as individuals. So this is one of the main things that we learn. And next week, inshallah, we'll move on to how Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, how he looked after the Prophet ﷺ, how he had love for the Prophet ﷺ, how he looked after him, and how also different incidents happen. We see even before he becomes a prophet, many more signs come. Even at birth, there were prophecies of him becoming a prophet. We know all of the Jews that moved into Medina, they were so influential that they had almost taken over Medina. They had control of Medina. They had Medina in their fingertips. That many Jews were there. They'd all come because of the prophecy. The scripture told them that the Prophet ﷺ was going to be born here. That's why they had moved there. Even at the birth, all these miracles came. They proved the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ, the fact he's going to be a prophet. As he grows older, when he becomes 12, he goes to Syria and an incident happens. Then he participates in these wars with the Quraysh as well. All of these small things that happen, they all build up to the prophethood of the Prophet ﷺ and the nobility which he has and the way he used to hold himself in his society. So inshallah we'll move on to that next week inshallah. This week inshallah, we'll move on to the spiritual activity. It's going to be a bit of a cycle. We've only done, I think this is week 5 or week 6, I think. So we've had 4 or 5 weeks already. So moving to the 6th week. So we've had 4 main activities. So we have the awabin, salah, we have dhikr, Quran, and dua. These are the 4 main core activities. And these are activities specifically to get close to Allah. So now the main one was, one of them which we haven't done for a while, is the dhikr. So we'll try and do that today. Again, it's very, very simple. We try and recite certain things. Again, those of us that don't know by heart, we try and take these and keep these as well. These will be in the things. Again, all of the things which we've done, they're meant to be things we can bring into our daily lives. Not just things we do on a Wednesday. So things which we can bring into our everyday lives. So for example, this dhikr, we had the dua which we're meant to be reading, and this is meant to be something which should have come into our lives. Awabin, we looked at the times of the day we were meant to pray, so that should have become a part of our lives. When you looked at the Quran, obviously the Quran was meant to become a part of our lives. Dua was also meant to become a part of our lives. So this is something we should try and think about and worry about, how we can bring this not just for Wednesday but every day into our lives. So this piece of paper, everyone got one? Just leave them. Okay. So very simple. We just recite the following a set number of times. The set number of times It means a set number of times. So now we can set for ourselves whatever we think we can read. Generally the default is 100, but that's a very big number and some of us can't do that. That would take, maybe 10, 20. It doesn't take that long, but a lot of us, we just don't think we can do that. So last time we did about 30, but we try and fix a number that 20 times or 10 times every day I will recite these three things. Like we mentioned before, just in case we've forgotten, the adhkar in the Quran and the Sunnah are countless. It's very difficult to bring all of them even into one book. It's very hard. Imam Nawawi has written a whole book called Kitabul Adhkar, and it's as thick as the average book. It's a very, very thick book. It's like 600-700 pages. So now on there we see different adhkar for different pages, for different times. So we see how we can bring different adhkar into our lives. But all of them is very difficult. So now what this aims to do is the adhkar which we find in the Quran and the Sunnah, this splits them into three main sections. So number one is praising Allah. So we'll find Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. For example, the last hadith of Bukhari, many of us may know, Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah al-Azim. We have different hadith in different books of hadith which all give us different virtues. That is the praise of Allah. Many hadith which praise Allah. There's other hadith which show the Prophet ﷺ would do istighfar, and he would tell us to do istighfar, to seek forgiveness from Allah. And the third type of category is durood. Again, we find many books just on durood, just on sending salutations. We can find a whole, we can spend hours on reading just the different ways of sending salam on the Prophet ﷺ. So this paper, it covers all three types with one simple dua from each one. So the first one, we'll just do the translation quickly, just in case we don't know. Subhanallah, glory be to Allah. Walhamdulillah, praise be to Allah. Wa la ilaha illallah, there's no worthy of worship except Allah. Wallahu akbar, and Allah is the greatest. Wa la hawla wa la quwwa, there's no might, wa la quwwa, there's no power, illa billah, except with Allah, al-Ali al-Azim, who is the Ali, is the high, and Azim, the almighty. So this is the first one, this is the praise of Allah. So we try and read this one. Second one, astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah al-Azima. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Astaghfirullah, I seek forgiveness from Allah al-Azim, who's very, very great. And the last one, Allahumma, O Allah, salli ala Muhammad, send salutations on Muhammad's, wa ala alihi, and on his family, wa barik wa sallim, and give blessings, and send salam, send peace on him as well. So basically these are the three categories of dua. We try and read this every day for a set number of times, inshallah. So today we'll try and spend about 10 minutes, we've written down. We try and spend about 10 minutes. We try and read all three, about 10, 20, how many other times we can. We try and, fix 20 inshallah. We try and read it at least 20 times. And then on a daily basis we try and bring these into our lives. This is something which really helps. We try and concentrate on the words, on the letters, and inshallah we'll do this for a few minutes, inshallah.